A new way of talking about the drug problem would be, let's talk about drugs in terms of what they do. What do we want and what do they do? So here you have a family of drugs and the typical image of the addict. What is a drug addict? Well, it's a person who has an obsessive behavior pattern that is unexamined and that causes them to return again and again to the same source of stimulus or the same source of stimulus without ever cognizing the reason why. In other words, unexamined behavior is what is alarming about drug addiction, that people behave like they are obsessed. Well, on that scale, then the most powerful drug of the late 20th century is television and propaganda. And the way in which we consume propaganda is amazing. I mean, the most intelligent of us, the ones who hold ourselves most aloof, are probably junkies through and through when it comes to the media. And the media just makes you stupider and stupider and stupider. You become less able to formulate a creative response, less able to tell what is real and what is not, less able to empower yourself. And there's just more and more and more of it. The average American watches 6.5 hours of TV per day. Average. Imagine if a drug that you smoke or shoot or snort had been introduced into this country after World War II, and that now the average American was consuming 6.5 hours a day of this thing. I mean, you would have the fundamentalists foaming at the mouth. There would be riots in the street. It's that we define these things so oddly. We don't attempt to make sense. What I was trying to say this morning about the fact that we must change our minds. We must change our minds. Business as usual will lead to exacerbated conflict over resources and turf, and eventually thermonuclear catastrophe. If the evolution of consciousness is not the way to solve the world's problems, then I don't know what it is. Well, the psychedelics were originally described as consciousness-expanding drugs. That was the phenomenological description of what they were. We need to intervene in our own psyches. We cannot afford the luxury of an unconscious mind that can throw up a Hitler or a Khomeini. We cannot afford the unexamined obsessive behavior pattern that leads us into a conditioned response when somebody leans on our territory or insults our racial heritage or something like that. We have to realize that it is going to take creative intellectual engineering to steer us through the narrow valley of being. And it's always been that way. This is what shamanism is using plants to balance and control what is otherwise an extremely violence-prone, neurotic species. The price we pay when the symbiotic relationship to the rest of nature is interrupted, we lose our bearings. I'm not talking metaphorically. I don't mean about sniffing the air and making medicine wheels. I mean about putting the chemicals, the enzymes from the natural environment into your body that create the seamless web that unites us to the purpose of the planet. These psychedelic compounds are bearing information. They are pheromones from the body of Gaia that we, by imbibing, can then attune ourselves to the larger purposes of nature, so that we then can fit ourselves into the picture. We have a purpose. It is to care for the planet, to nurture it and lead it forward, much the way bees do, much the way termites do. But we are conscious creatures. Our caring, our honey making, our architectonic activities operate on a different epistemic mode, because We have somehow one foot in a higher dimension. This is the mystery of ourselves.